Al Capone. The name is legendary. We've all seen the movies, the pinstripe suits, the diamond pinky rings, the cigars, and the drum-fed Tommy guns. We see the gangster, the celebrity, the scar. In the 1920s, he was the most famous and the most photographed man in America. He waved to crowds at baseball games. He handed out money on the street. He ran soup kitchens for the poor during the Depression. He was the people's champion, a folk hero, the man who gave the people what they wanted. Booze, that was one Al Capone, but there was another. A second darker Capone, a Capone the public rarely saw. This was the man who ruled Chicago, not with a smile, but with an iron fist, wrapped in a $100 bill. This was the CEO of a shadow government, a man who commanded an army of over 1,000 gunmen, who bribed an entire city's police force, who owned judges and politicians, and who, when the system failed, would personally end a man's life with a baseball bat. The movies, they barely scratch the surface. They show you the myth. We are here to show you the machine. How did a bouncer from a Brooklyn slum become the undisputed multi-billion-dollar king of Chicago? How did he really rule? Before the throne, there was Brooklyn. Born in 1889 to Italian immigrants, Alphonse Capone was a product of the gutter. He was smart but violent. He dropped out of school in the 6th grade after punching a female teacher in the face. The streets became his university. His professor was a man named Johnny Torrio. Torrio wasn't just a thug, he was a visionary, a criminal strategist. He taught Capone that violence is bad for business, but when it's necessary, it must be total. Capone learned his lessons well. He worked as a bouncer, a bartender. It was here he earned his famous nickname. After insulting a patron's sister, her brother, Frank Galluccio, slashed Capone's face 3 times. Scarface, a name he would hate for the rest of his life. In 1919, the entire criminal landscape of America changed forever. The 18th Amendment, prohibition, the manufacture, sale, and transport of intoxicating liquor was now illegal. It was the single greatest business opportunity in American history. Johnny Torrio knew this. He left New York for a wide open territory, Chicago, and he made one phone call to his brightest, most ambitious protege. He needed an enforcer. He needed Al Capone. Chicago in 1920 was a gold rush, a network of rival gangs, Irish, Polish, Jewish, Italian, all scrambling to control the flow of illegal beer and whiskey. Torrio and Capone, working for Big Jim Colosimo, began to build an empire. But Big Jim was old school. He was happy with his brothels. He didn't see the potential in bootlegging, so he had to go. On May 11th, 1920, Big Jim Colosimo was shot and killed in his own cafe. The police never solved it. But suddenly, Johnny Torrio was king, and Al Capone was his crown prince. For 4 years, they built a staggering enterprise. They operated breweries, distilleries, and a network of thousands of speakeasies, hidden bars that sold their product. Business was booming, but success breeds competition. The North Side Gang, led by the ferocious Dion O'Banion, was their chief rival. After a series of double crosses, Torrio and Capone had O'Banion murdered in his own flower shop. The war was on. The North Siders retaliated. In January 1925, they ambushed Torrio outside his home. They shot him 5 times, in the jaw, neck, chest, and groin. Miraculously, Torrio survived. But his nerve was broken. From his hospital bed, he summoned Capone. He was done. He was leaving Chicago. He looked at his protege and said, "It's all yours, Al." At the age of 26, Al Capone was now the sole, undisputed boss. The throne was his, and what he would build on it would change the world. This is the core of the story. This is what the movies get wrong. Capone wasn't just a gangster. He was a CEO, an innovator. He ran his organization, the Chicago outfit, like a modern corporation. Corporation that at its peak was earning over $100 million a year. In today's money, that is over $1.5 billion. How? How did he really rule? He built his empire on 3 pillars, not 1. 3. The business, the corruption, and the violence. And you cannot understand Capone until you understand all of them. Pillar 1, the business, the machine. Capone's genius was logistics. He cornered the market. He controlled the supply chain from production to distribution. Visualize it. AI can show us the machine. Imagine a fleet of trucks moving like a private army, rumbling in from Canada, loaded with high-end whiskey. Imagine secret, massive breweries, hidden in plain sight, operating 24/7, churning out millions of gallons of beer. Imagine a network of warehouses, storage depots, and front companies all moving this product into the city. And then the speakeasies, over 10,000 of them in Chicago alone, from high-class nightclubs to filthy basement dives. Every single one, everyone bought their liquor from Capone. If they didn't, a friendly visit would be paid. If they still refused, a bomb would be delivered. It was a franchise, a monopoly, enforced by terror. He diversified. He ran gambling dens, brothels, racetracks. He muscled his way into labor unions, controlling everything from laundry services to movie theater projectors. Every dollar, from every illegal bet, every shot of whiskey, every corrupt union flowed upwards into one central Teflon-coated pocket. This is the kind of power that you are helping visual case files investigate. We use technology to peel back the layers of history and show you the systems hidden beneath the myth. If you believe in this mission, subscribe to the channel and join the investigation. Pillar 2, the corruption, the power map. But the machine could not run without grease. And in Chicago, the grease was corruption. This is how Capone really ruled, not with a gun, but with a wallet. Let's use AI to visualize his true territory. Forget the maps of gangland rivals. Let's build the power map. Imagine the city of Chicago. At the center, Capone's headquarters, the Lexington Hotel. Now let's draw the lines of control. First, to City Hall, a thick red line, straight to the office of Mayor Big Bill Thompson. Thompson was Capone's man. His campaigns were funded by the outfit. In return, Capone operated with total immunity. Now,
with you, gentlemen.
Let's draw more lines. To the police, not just one cop, entire districts. Over half of the Chicago police force was on Al Capone's payroll. Commanders, captains, street cops, they were his private security. They would arrest his rivals. They would act as lookouts during liquor deliveries. They would even act as his personal bodyguards. Draw more lines. To the courts, judges, prosecutors, state's attorneys, all on the payroll. In the rare event one of Capone's men was arrested, the case would be assigned to a friendly judge. Witnesses would be intimidated or they would disappear. Evidence would be lost. The case would be dismissed. Between 1923 and 1927, there were over 200 gangland murders in Chicago. Almost none resulted in a conviction. This was his true power. It wasn't a gang, it was a shadow government. He had achieved what few criminals in history ever have. He had become more powerful than the state. The law was irrelevant because he owned the law. Pillar 3, the violence, the message. But what happens when the wallet fails? What happens when a rival doesn't want your money and isn't afraid of your cops? Then you turn to the third pillar, the one that holds everything else up. Violence, sudden, spectacular, and unforgivable. Capone's primary rival was George "Bugs" Moran, the new leader of the North Side gang. Moran was a thorn in Capone's side, hijacking his liquor trucks and refusing to bow. Capone decided to send a message, not just to Moran, but to the entire city. He decided to eliminate his competition permanently. The date was February 14th, 1929, St. Valentine's Day. Capone's men lured Moran's top lieutenants to a garage on North Clark Street under the guise of a major whiskey sale. 7 of Moran's gang were there, waiting. Bugs Moran himself was running late. At 10:30 a.m., a Cadillac, painted to look exactly like a police car, pulled up. 5 men stepped out. 2 were dressed in Chicago police uniforms. They entered the garage. Moran's men, thinking it was just a routine raid, did exactly as they were told. They dropped their guns and lined up, facing the wall. The cops signaled the other men who were carrying Thompson submachine guns. What happened next was not an arrest, it was an execution. A methodical, one-sided slaughter. The gunman fired over 150 rounds, shredding the 7 men, nearly cutting one of them in half. Then, in a final brilliant piece of theatre, the 2 men in plainclothes walked out with their hands in the air, prodded by the 2 policemen. To any witness on the street, it looked like a routine police shakedown. The gunman simply drove away. Bugs Moran, who had arrived just moments after the police car, saw what was happening and fled. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre shocked the world. It was too much, too brutal. Capone, who was conveniently in Florida to establish his alibi, was the obvious culprit. The public began to turn. The celebrity was now public enemy number 1, and the federal government finally decided that Al Capone had to fall. Everyone thinks they know how Capone fell. We've all seen the movies. Elliot Ness and his heroic team of untouchables, raiding breweries, spilling barrels of beer into the street. A dramatic Hollywood showdown. It's a great story, and Elliot Ness was a real agent. He did harass Capone's operations. He was incorruptible. He did annoy Capone. But Elliot Ness is not the man who took him down. The man who truly destroyed Al Capone wasn't a hero cop. He wasn't a G-man. He was an accountant. His name was Frank J. Wilson. A quiet, glasses-wearing, obsessive investigator for the IRS, the Treasury Department's tax unit. While Ness was kicking indoors, Wilson was sitting in a small, smoky room drowning in paper. The government knew they couldn't get Capone for murder or bootlegging. The witnesses were dead, and the cops were paid. But if a man earns $100 million and he doesn't pay his taxes, that is a federal crime. The problem was proving it. Capone never signed a check. He never held a bank account. His name wasn't on a single deed. He dealt only in cash. For 2 years, Frank Wilson hunted. He analyzed millions of dollars in wire transfers, bank records, and tips. He was looking for a single direct link, a single mistake. And then he found it. It wasn't a gun, it wasn't a witness, it was a ledger, a simple accounting book from one of Capone's gambling dens. The book detailed the casino's profits, and in a moment of pure arrogance, the accountant had written down a note. Al's net profits from the casino, $250,000. It was the smoking gun, the direct link, the one mistake that would unravel an empire. On June 5th, 1931, Al Capone was indicted on 22 counts of federal income tax evasion. Capone wasn't worried. He did what he always did. He tried to bribe the jury. He tried to intimidate the witnesses, but the judge, a man named James Wilkerson, was one step ahead. At the last possible second, Judge Wilkerson swapped the entire jury with a jury from a different, unrelated case. Capone's men had bribed the wrong people. The trap was sprung. Al Capone was found guilty. He was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, the longest sentence ever given for tax evasion. They sent him to Atlanta. But even from prison, he ran his empire. He bribed the guards. He had a carpeted cell. He had special privileges. He was still the king. So the government transferred him. They sent him to a new, inescapable, maximum security prison. A cold, damp rock in the middle of San Francisco Bay, Alcatraz. At Alcatraz, there were no privileges. There was no payroll. He was just a number. Inmate number 85, his power board was gone. His empire had crumbled without him. But his greatest enemy wasn't the government. It wasn't a rival. It was the disease he had contracted as a young man in a Brooklyn brothel, syphilis. For years, he had refused treatment. Now, in his cell, the disease began to attack his brain. The most brilliant criminal mind of the 20th century began to unravel. He would rave in his cell, arguing with ghosts. He would sit in the prison yard babbling to himself. He joined the prison band, where he learned to play the banjo. This is how the king fell, not in a hail of gunfire, but in a quiet, fog-shrouded cell, his mind eaten away, plucking at a banjo. In 1939 he was released, a broken, childlike man. He retired to his mansion in Florida, where he spent his final years fishing in his pool and suffering from dementia. He died in 1947 from a stroke. He was 48 years old. He ruled Chicago with absolute power. He built an empire of money, corruption, and fear. And in the end, he was destroyed by a quiet man with a pencil. What part of Capone's story fascinates you the most? The business genius or the brutal gangster? Let us know in the comments below.